Good afternoon. I am Brooks Berndt. I'm the Minister of Environmental Justice for the United Church of Christ. A warm welcome to all of you who are joining us for our Creation Justice webinar. We are excited to be the place where people put faith into action for the common good of humanity and for our common home. We are excited today to have this stellar lineup of panelists joining with us. We will get to introducing all three of them in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce my co-host, the Reverend Michael Malcom. He is the Executive Director for Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light and the Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. We've got two Interfaith Power and Light directors with us today. So he is the executive director for Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. I won't make you move to Minnesota, even though I know you love the cold weather. And also the executive director for the People's Justice Council. Michael, I know you have recently made a sacred pilgrimage of sorts. You have been to the front lines in Minnesota. Tell us about it and help us frame today's conversation.
Yeah, Brooks, I actually had the opportunity to be with Julia and Reverend Baird in Minnesota, and let me tell you how delightful that was. As we open today, let me say that I also recently met a sister by the name of Tara Huska. Tara and I connected a couple of months ago, and we started growing this friendship. And this friendship recently led me to Minnesota, actually, to stand with she and other Indigenous family to stop Line 3. And beloved, although I had a great time, I also must admit that I felt leaving a little disappointed. And I was disappointed because I was unable to be with my friend Tara. Tara was one of the front line, was on the front line taking a stand, and I couldn't be with her. And the reason why that I was not there is because of the need being everywhere. Another reason I wasn't there is because of a fear of being placed in an unsafe position. Of the over 2,000 people that showed up for that event, 350 of us or so were of the multi-faith coalition. And as I reflected, I thought the harvest is right, but the laborers are few. The question that preceded this thought was, when will the clergy outnumber the crowd in this fight for the Creator's cosmos? In a TED Talk, Tara spoke about how Indigenous people treaty rights are being violated because treaties are seen as negotiable, while state laws are not. She said the way that we stand is by educating on treaty rights and taking your money out of the banks. In other words, being present means doing something uncomfortable. I believe as people of faith, we are being called to do something uncomfortable. In a call to stand with our Indigenous family, we are being called to be uncomfortable. This is where I'd like to park for a moment. As I said before, the harvest is ready, but it just ain't enough workers. Beloved, I believe that we fit the role of the few. I believe that Jesus is giving a word of encouragement to let us know that there are numerous ways that we can make a difference. I believe he is saying that for us to engage, we can engage at whatever level we need to engage because there's just plenty of room. Jesus is also giving us a cautionary tale of overcoming our fear of being overwhelmed. Listen, this work can be hard. Always standing and always fighting can be daunting. Hence is why we need each other in this field. Now, I realize not everyone will do it your way, but you need them in the field. I know that everyone won't even look like you, but you still need them in the field. Tara says that 40% of Native people are under the age of 24. They are the fastest growing demographic. They are doctors, they are lawyers, they are teachers, they are scientists, they are engineers, they are medicine men and women and medicine women. They are sun dancers and pipe carriers. They are traditional language speakers. They are the elders that we listen to for instructions as we stood in solidarity with them. They are the ones who prayed for our protection from the elements while we were standing. In order for you to get what needs to be done, and in order for you not to get overwhelmed, we need each other in the field. Last, Jesus tells us, get in the field. In other words, get to work. Today, we are coming together to learn from our guests how we can actually stand in solidarity. In other words, how we can be in the field and how we can get to work. We look forward to hearing what you bring to the table today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I know my amen is but one of many amens. So we appreciate those remarks as we get started, as you frame what we're about to hear. I'm going to introduce our speakers in the order that they'll be speaking. Up first, we will have Julia Nerbonne, who is the Executive Director for Minnesota Interfaith Power Light, where she works to build a movement for climate justice in over 400 Minnesota congregations. She has a PhD in conservation biology and has focused her research on how to create powerful social movements. Between 2011 and 2014, she was the founding director of MN 350, the 350 affiliate for Minnesota. Up next, we will then have the Reverend Baird Jacobs, born in St. Paul, Minnesota, a member of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican Nation located in central Wisconsin. He is currently the program director of racial justice for the Minnesota Council of Churches. He is the founder of Healing Minnesota Stories, an initiative dedicated to creating events of dialogue, education, and healing, particularly within faith communities. And then our third and final speaker today will be Nina Berglund, who was one of 13 youth climate interveners. She was gained full status as a formal intervening party in contesting Minnesota's permit process for Line 3. In advocating to stop Line 3, she has written for the Guardian newspaper. She's appeared on BBC World Radio. For the international youth organization known as Earth Guardians, she has served as a member of their Youth Council and Indigenous Council. It's an honor to have all three of our speakers with us today. And Julia, we will get started with you. If you could give us an introduction to this important movement and cause.
There we go. Hello, everyone. And hopefully you can see my slides. Are they looking good? Awesome. I want to just recognize there's Reverend Michael Malcom. There you are. We are overlooking LaSalle Lake, which is a sacred spot in Minnesota. It's the deepest lake in Minnesota, and it's the first lake that the Mississippi River crosses through on its journey from the headwaters to the Gulf of Mexico. So we are there. We have just completed our prayer circle, and folks are about to march down to the Mississippi River crossing just 1 week ago. So I'm going to begin by just telling you all a little bit about the history of Line 3, so you know what we're talking about sort of logistically. And then I'm going to show you a couple of videos of what it felt like to be at the Treaty People Gathering, where there were between 2,000 and 3,000 people on the front lines just a week ago.
You muted yourself.
There we go. This is a map of the northern part of Minnesota. And what you're not looking at is the different treaty territories, but this entire area in gray is part of several treaties that were signed between the United States government and the different Anishinaabe bans in the middle of the 19th century, so 1837, 1855, 1864. This is where the current pipeline in in oranges, and then in green, the proposed new pipeline, which is the focus of all of this resistance. And as you can see, there are two pipelines shown there. Enbridge likes to talk about this as a replacement project, but it in fact is not a replacement project. It's a brand new pipeline in a brand new corridor. A couple of fun facts about this. This pipeline is roughly the same size as the now dead Keystone XL pipeline. It will, if built, carry 760,000 barrels of oil a day. And that would be the equivalent of building 50 new coal-fired power plants. So it's a climate disaster. It is also a pipeline that will go through over 200 water bodies, crossing the Mississippi River twice, and 43 wild rice beds. So to put some context on this, Line 3, if built, is going to be violating treaty rights. And that's because in 1855 and 1837, when the Ojibwe people signed over the deed to their land, they reserved the right to hunt, fish, gather wild rice, travel across these lands. That was never given over to the United States government, and this has been recognized in a number of different court cases. So as we think about this pipeline route, while some of it does not, I'll go back again, you can see some of it, the old pipeline in orange goes through the Leech Lake Reservation and the Fond du Lac Reservation. The new pipeline corridor goes around those reservations because of the political context, but it does not go around what is the 1855 treaty territory. So if this pipeline were to leak, and all pipelines leak, it would impact these wild rice beds, which are sacred to not only the people, but also essential to their economy. The influx of pipeline workers is coming at, it couldn't be a worse time. They began this pipeline in the fall of 2020 during the culmination of the COVID pandemic. And it also has been shown to escalate the risk of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And there's more to say about this at another time. Crossing 200 bodies of water, and a climate accelerator. I love this diagram because it tells the incredible story that in all of the emissions categories in Minnesota from 2016, if we expand Line 3, the emissions will be greater than the entire emissions from the state of Minnesota in 2016. Which is really staggering. So when we think about the climate emergency and the rights of Indigenous people, both are highly threatened. This is a picture of the Athabasca Tar Sands up in Alberta, and you can see the boreal forest. And this is what it looks like after the development of the tar sands. So this is truly not only the dirtiest fuel on earth, but it also impacts the First Nations in Canada. The Canadians, incidentally, have said, no way can we transport this oil through Canada. So they're trying to send it through the US. Unfortunately, after a 7-year process, the pipeline was approved with the final permits last November from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And they've begun construction, as you have heard. But of course, the fight is not over. Led by Indigenous people, we have been on the front lines of the resistance movement. This is a march in downtown St. Paul, but there has been a year of resistance all over the world and all over Minnesota. This is a faith community march on the 11th of March. And you can see up in the upper right corner some of the matting material that is being used so that they can cross these sensitive wetlands. And of course, this is a fight that's being led by the Indigenous people in Minnesota who are on the front lines. So as you heard from Reverend Michael Malcom, over 2,000 people showed up last weekend. On the left, you can see, this is my sister, Dawn Goodwin, Everlasting Wind. She has been one of the leaders of the RISE Coalition, and they have occupied an area on the first crossing of the Mississippi River. Right now, there are currently about 80 folks who are tenting there to hold the resistance to the pipeline in that critical spot where they're hoping to be drilling. And so she is there. They are entering the Mississippi River in ceremony last Monday. And Michael, I think you were there at that spot. So people of faith have been showing up by the hundreds. This is again, just some of the folks at the faith leader prayer circle. You can see all of our signs: people of faith against line 3, Muslims against line 3, Jews against line 3, Anishinaabe elders against line 3. And again, that's the Lake LaSalle in the background. I wanted to just show you, this is not the highest quality video, but it really gives you a taste of what that gathering was like. And so I'm going to share some words from one activist and incredible organizer, Winona LaDuke, at our welcoming gathering at the Treaty People, the multi-faith network of the Treaty People gathering. Maybe this isn't going to work.
So when we think about who we are as treaty people,
I'm going to stop this just for 1 second. And
we're coming from all over now. This is a national issue, and we're standing up behind Indigenous leaders like our dear sister Winona LaDuke and other Indigenous leaders who've been standing up and helping us have a guiding light by how they're leading. Let's say it out loud. We see you.
We see you.
We're with you.
We are with you.
We're gonna walk with you all the way until this pipeline is stopped.
We're gonna walk with you all the way until this pipeline is stopped.
So it's really a remarkable time that we are here now, and we all know it. You know, I like what Arundhati Roy says when she talks about pandemic as portal. And she says in the history of the world, pandemics have forced societies to change, and this one's no different. You know, so I'm so grateful y'all came out, because, you know, when we signed the treaty, you could drink all the water from every creek, right? And every lake and every river. And our understanding is that's how it would continue. You know, our treaties were agreements that our ancestors, our people were negotiating these treaties that would protect our rights for generations ahead. You know, from our perspective, we're all going to keep pushing, and we need you to be there with us. So it's not just our problem, it's everybody's problem.
Yes.
Yes. You know, one of the things is that we actually need infrastructure for people, not for oil companies.
Right. Amen.
Right. You know? So we're going to protect the water, and we're going to keep pushing them, and we know that it's possible to stop a pipeline. We just saw the Keystone XL get canceled, didn't we? That's right. We just saw the Jordan Cove pipeline get canceled out to Oregon too, right? That was right. That was good work out there.
Down to the well, ring me like a bell. Let the water ring me like a bell. Rock me. Let the water rock me like a child. For this well will not run dry, nor this well will not run.
I'm here because I'm a faith leader, and so I'm interested in hearing what the request is for repair, so that I can help lead a congregation in real practical terms, like not just talking about it and reading about it, but what does repair actually look like in action?
all right. I'm going to stop there. I have another video of what it looked like the next day when we were part of a much larger group training and thinking about decolonization, but I'm going to let Jim Baird step in and talk a little bit about what that felt like. And we also have Joe here who's calling in from the front lines. Hello, Joe. With a little bit of an update. Actually, is it all right, Brooks, if we allow Joe to give us a little update about what's happening right now at that Mississippi River crossing?
Sure, there's nothing like a live update from the front lines.
Beautiful. Joe has been working with Minnesota IPL over the past 2 years as a pipeline resistance coordinator. He is now stepped out of that role. If you're interested in speaking with somebody at MNIPL, Julia Nerbonne is our new staff person in that role. But Joe is serving as a chaplain, and he's up there at the front lines. And Joe, what's happening up there?
Hey, hello all. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, it's good to be with you all. Good to be with you, Reverend Baird, Julia, and all our friends of the UCC. Yeah, so I'm here just logging in from about 20 yards this way down this boardwalk. I'm on the easement of the Line 3 pipeline construction, and it's 1855 treaty territory, and it's place where the first place where Enbridge plans to drill under the Mississippi River. And here, about 40 yards that way, is the river, and it's about 5 or 6 feet across. Just a stream here, just a young river. And so we've stood here in resistance. This is day 8. There we go, my phone is fixed. This is day 8 of the Firelight encampment led by elders here from the White Earth Reservation, and water protectors from all different nations have come here, and many allies. And it's been an honor to be here as an ally with this treaty stand. And they've been very specific about here with ceremony and prayer about this being a treaty stand. And that means that being here is an effort to stop a pipeline, but being here is a continued effort to recognize the sovereignty of these nations and these peoples and their ongoing inherent rights to hunt, fish, gather, travel in these lands. And then our responsibilities, speaking for myself as an ally, as a non-Indigenous person, my inherent responsibility to uphold these agreements between our peoples. And so that's something that we're hoping to model to the world through this encampment, through this Firelight camp. And so follow the RISE Coalition for ongoing updates, but I'll just tell you briefly the situation today. We're served an eviction notice by Enbridge yesterday. And so after 4 days of ceremony, that eviction notice was given and full of lies by the company, claiming that we had done property damage, claiming that we were, trying to paint a picture of this prayerful and peaceful place as an occupancy of troublemakers. And so we have refused that. The Indigenous leaders have refused that eviction notice and said, go back and write it better, because we want to have a peace talk here. We want to exit in a good way and continue this fight. So we are closing with ceremony and prayer, and we plan to exit with prayer at the river here in the next day. So be watching the RISE Coalition for updates and looking to hear from the leaders on the ground exactly what's happening. But there's about 80 water protectors here, and really honored to take this stand to protect the Mississippi and to uphold our treaty responsibilities with these sovereign nations that have welcomed us into this really beautiful land for a time. Yeah, that's what's on my mind. Grateful to be in this space.
Thank you so much, Joe. We really appreciate your giving us that live report. We'll transition now to the Reverend Jim Baird Jacobs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for that update, Joe. Good to see you again. Yeah, so I had the pleasure of being up north with Julia and Joe and Reverend Malcom, and about between 2,000 and 3,000 of our closest friends up there. And I was asked to kind of host and lead our multi-faith prayer vigil at Lake LaSalle there, which is some of the pictures that Julia showed you. And first of all, I just want to give due credit and props to the United Church of Christ. You were duly represented by a number of UCC clergy and lay leadership there. And though I am not UCC myself, have enjoyed a long and rich history with UCC folks, both here in Minnesota and nationally. And I always trust UCC folks to show up and be allies wherever justice is needed anywhere on Turtle Island. And so, as I said, I was asked to lead this interfaith, multi-faith prayer vigil. And as I was planning it, I was in conversation with a good friend of mine who she is a UCC minister here in Minneapolis. And we were just trying to figure out, okay, what should we do? You know, like how are we going to organize this? And she asked me, she said, well, do you think we should do like what we did in Standing Rock? And I know, I knew immediately what she was asking. And so the background to that story is in 2016, when water protectors were gathered out near Cannonball, North Dakota, to stand in opposition of the Dakota Access Pipeline, there was a call for clergy, and clergy folks from around the nation responded to that all call and showed up and bore witness and were a presence at Standing Rock. And one of the things that they did there is the clergy folk, and I believe there was over 500, between 500 and 600 clergy folk who responded to that call. And one of the things that they did there is they produced a copy of the Doctrine of Discovery, and they burned it there at Standing Rock. And for anyone who's watching, if you have not done any research on the Doctrine of Discovery, I would encourage you to do your research, because honestly, everything we are talking about here in terms of colonization of the Western Hemisphere, literally the transatlantic slave trade, the oppression of Black bodies, it can all be tied to the Doctrine of Discovery, which was a 15th century series of edicts that came out of the Vatican. And it was the theological authority, which later then became the legal authority, to place any unbaptized body in a position of perpetual slavery. And of course, the unbaptized bodies that they were coming across in the 15th century were Black and brown bodies. And this was the theological and then later legal authority to seize the land and place the bodies in perpetual slavery. And you're sitting there, you're thinking, okay, well, what does that have to do with me, you know, sitting in North Carolina or Oregon or wherever you're checking in from? And I'll tell you this, that if you own your home, your legal rights to own your home is directly tied to the legal authority of the Doctrine of Discovery. The church that you attend owns the land that they are on as a direct benefit of the legal authority granted to the United States by the Doctrine of Discovery. So everything ties back to this Doctrine of Discovery. And so when we were at the Treaty Peoples gathering last week, And we were asked, my colleague and my friend asked, should we burn the doctrine of discovery again? One of my questions was, well, what happened when you burned it last time? Because honestly, you burned it 5 years ago, and what has happened? And I will say this, the UCC is in good company in that in the UCC, forgive me if I don't know all the terminology, but I believe your national gatherings are called General Synods. And so the General Synod, the 29th General Synod of 2013 is where the UCC officially repudiated the doctrine of discovery, which is wonderful. And you join the company of the ELCA and the PCUSA and the UMC, and all these various denominations have all taken a stand in repudiating the doctrine of discovery. And that's well and good, but I ask the question, so what? So you've recognized that this doctrine of discovery is worthy of repudiation. You have officially repudiated it at the national level. And so what? And so what I told my friend when she asked, when we come together, should we burn the doctrine of discovery again? I told her, I said, I love what you did at Standing Rock. It was a beautiful moment. It was just done for the wrong audience. And I said, we in Indian country, we don't need you bringing your faulty doctrine and your bad theology to us and publicly repudiating it in front of us. I said, if you really want
Is it just me or did he freeze up for everybody?
Yeah, I'm afraid right when he was getting to the
good
real
stuff.
juicy part, he froze on us. So we'll pause a second to see if divine intervention allows for the truth to get back into webinar land.
Sounds good. While you're doing that, Brooks, and while we're waiting on Reverend Baird to get back on with us, that was a question specific for you, Joe, concerning what you were discussing. Actually, I'm wrong. They said they got it answered. It was about the eviction notice itself. But there's another question in the chat while we're waiting on Rev Baird to get back with us that says, what can those of us who cannot come to Minnesota to stand in solidarity do from our homes? Is it write letters of support to the water protectors, write Joe Biden, write our EPA? Who permitted this exactly? Who can they actually contact to get in touch with? How can they advocate from afar?
I'm going to unmute myself and answer that question. I've just put a link in the chat. I was going to do this at the end, but I'll do it now. We have an advocacy ask. It's Joe Biden himself and Gina McCarthy and those who are in his administration. They have the ability to block the 404B permit that has been issued from the Army Corps of Engineers. And we actually think that this is one of the best routes to ending the pipeline is really focusing on treaty rights, because these were permits that were issued under Donald Trump and he did no consultation with the tribes at all. So if for no other reason than to respect the process, we need those permits to be stopped long enough that they can fully review both the treaty obligations and also the environmental impacts of the pipeline. So that's, you can do that. It says you get an error, shoot. Let me work on that. And Joe, will you say a couple words about what that people can find on the RISE Facebook page? I also put that in while I go and find that link.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for tagging in, Julia. Those Ask to Biden and those links for us to get those signatures compiled is going to be important. those calls, actions from where you are in solidarity. It matters us making this story loud and clear at this moment, so Biden can stop the project before they drill under the rivers and continue violating the treaties. As far as the RISE page, there's a number of frontline groups, Indigenous groups that could use your monetary support, could use your follow on social media, so you can watch what's happening on the ground and learn and come and support, or let your friends know that they can come and support. The call is out from leaders here for people to join on the front lines, and that can look many ways. Being on the water, canoeing, camping, being in parks, being at resistance camps, being in actions. All of those are invitations, and so I would in the chat, maybe Julia, you could also link mnipl.org/stopline3, and that has the links to the 4 or 5 Indigenous groups on their socials. Yep.
Thank you so much, Joe. It looks like we have Reverend Jim Baird Jacobs back. I'm sure that was an answer to all of our prayers, praying that Zoom would get us reconnected. And so, Jim Baird Jacobs, we were all hanging on your word, and to know how we can go beyond repudiation. If you want to pick it up where you left off.
Yeah, my apologies for that. Who would have thought that you have one guy in an office building in downtown Minneapolis, and you have one guy 4 hours north out in the boonies of Minnesota, and I would be the one having the connection problems. Basically, what I was saying and what I want to reiterate is, churches have spoken a lot of words to the American Indian community. And, as preachers, and I speak as an insider, I'm a preacher myself, we are trained in using our words to move and motivate people. And I just, my greatest desire is to see, like Reverend Michael Malcom said, when will the faith leadership outnumber the non-faith leadership at these events? You've repudiated the doctrine of discovery. That is beautiful. But my question then to UCC leadership and to all Christians who stand for justice is, you've repudiated the doctrine of discovery. So what? What does that mean? Show me what that looks like. In one way you can show us what that looks like is exactly what took place a week ago. You can stand with us, you can stand next to us, you can stand in front of us. You can use your voice to call for justice. You can add your name to all of the various petitions that are out there, all of the calls to action for Governor Biden. You can lean on, for President Biden. You can lean on President Biden and say, you did a good thing in stopping the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, how about we stop the identical pipeline that's just running a few hundred miles east of the Keystone pipeline and stop that one? And that is a small step in standing for Indigenous treaty rights. That is a small step in what it actually looks like to repudiate the doctrine of discovery and to put action to your words, your prophetic words, in calls for justice. And I think I will stop there.
Thank you so much for those words, and we appreciate them. We'll now transition to our final and third speaker for today. Nina, please take it away.
Hi everyone, can I roll through the window really quick? I'm currently driving. I'm sorry. I'm at work and I have a resident with me, but I can speak while I'm driving. I'm being as safe as I can. I'm sorry. This just so happened to work at this time. So my apologies, everyone, and I'll probably pull over when I get up here. But Betukile, Ihani washe everyone. Betukile mi chante washe na pe juzapi me met na hashove when I speak what chipui hemie. Hello, everyone. Good day. I hope you all are well. I am Nina Berglund. My spirit names is Northern Lights Woman and Appears in the Morning Woman. I am an enrolled member of the Northern Cheyenne Nation. I am also a Gala Lakota from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Grew up in the east side of St. Paul. I currently live in South St. Paul. I have been involved with Line 3 work since probably the end of Standing Rock in 2017. I was a senior in high school. I have been a part of the court process since around that time also, in being a part of the official intervening party that was mentioned when they introduced me. And I want to shout out the other panelists and say thank you for your guys' words. I wanted to highlight a little bit about what Reverend Jim Baird said about the doctrine of discovery, because it is very large, significant highlight in the reasons why pipelines are able to be built in this way that we see with Line 3, that we have seen with Dakota Access Pipeline, that we've seen with Keystone XL, all these different pipelines in recent times. We see the process and kind of what is expected when it comes to pipeline processes, especially in the court process. You know, we see that there's an incredible violation of treaty rights, and we see this go back with the doctrine of discovery. Personally, to hear that be brought up in this kind of conversation is very significant, because I was a part of a group of 14 youth that traveled to the Vatican in 2018 to speak with Vatican officials about the absolute abolishment of the doctrine of discovery and the papal bulls. So to hear, and I personally have been trying to work with bringing it up more in these conversations about climate justice and pipeline work, environmental justice, about how important it is to bring up these topics and these conversations about what true colonization has affected Indigenous communities and how it's still affecting Indigenous communities. And we see that Line 3 is a perfect representation of what the scene was looking like hundreds of years ago when they were coming to take our land. You know, when we look 200-300 years ago, that there was the same rhetoric, the same mindset of these people are inferior, therefore we are going to take what we want. We are the superior ones, and we can see the same storyline when it applies to Line 3. You know, I've been in many of the court hearings. I've been to the public comment meetings. I've been to so many Public Utilities Commission meetings, all on Line 3 throughout the years, and it's the same thing. It's the same story over and over again. I got to witness the chairwoman of the PUC cry. I don't know if any of you guys remember when they were making the decision 2 years ago to approve the pipeline. She literally cried in our faces as she said, "I'm sorry, but this needs to be done." And to me personally, to have watched the Public Utilities Commissions and these public, that are supposed to be public servants, listening to our pleas, asking how we feel about the pipeline and stuff like that, it just felt like it fell on really short ears, that they weren't listening, because obviously we see that these processes are working against us, and it's the same. I just feel like it's been the same thing for these past couple of years that I've been involved with Line 3, since I was a teenager to now being 21 years old, to see how this has evolved It's the same thing. It's extremely frustrating to have been a part of this process, but on that hand, it's been pretty down, pretty harsh. You know, going into those meetings, it just feels like they're speaking a different language. But then you go on the land and you go to the waters, and we did a 350-mile canoe journey in 2017 to stop Line 3, and you know, just being in the courts, being in these meetings, to being out on the land, the amount of difference that we see. When I was in Washington, D.C., I was thinking to myself, you know, how much different would it be if they were out there in nature making these decisions, when they were physically looking at the rivers that they're talking about, when they're physically looking at the lands, looking at the animals, looking at all the water that they're sitting here talking about in these meetings, in these courtrooms where you can't breathe, you can't, you know, you can't interact with anybody, you have to sit there quiet. Like, that's not how it's meant to be. And so, you know, that's my frustrations as a young person, you know, dealing in this process, working on Line 3 for the past couple of years, is that I am sick and tired of seeing the same thing happen. And I'm incredibly motivated and inspired by the youth, the young people that are coming out, because I remember when I was 16, 17 years old learning about the Line 3 pipeline, and now I can see, you know, younger people than that stepping out and stepping up, saying that, you know, we need to stop Line 3. And so my urgent request to all of you is to follow and listen to Indigenous leadership, all of those who are on the front lines right now. I personally wish I could be there on the front lines, but I work at a Native youth shelter in the city, so you know, my schedule is kind of bad. But I urgently request all of you to, if you are able to, make your way to the front lines, because this is happening, this is real. And to hear that the appeals court ruled against you know, all of us trying to stop Line 3 is super disheartening, but it's not surprising, because we've seen this time and time again. And so, you know, this is real. This is people's lives. This is my future at risk. This is all the youth that I work with futures at risk. And you know, the importance of this, and you know, how serious this work really is. I just couldn't stress it enough. And you know, take the words that the other panelists have said, and to take action, you know, divest from these companies and these banks that actively fund the pipeline. You know, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, US Bank are all active banks putting money into these pipeline projects and into these companies. And so, you know, like, obviously monetary donations are highly encouraged, you know, putting your bodies on the line, you know, calling whatever officials you have to, the president, the governor of Minnesota, the PUC, you know, letting them know that everyone says to stop Line 3. It's not just natives, it's not just the Ojibwe people, it's not just, you know, that's not just the people up north, but the entire country and the entire world says that we need to stop Line 3. So I'll end with that because I got to get going. But Wopila, thank you all.
Well, Nina, I hope you're not going to just run off from us. I do have a question for you.
I'll stay on, but I have to drive.
I got you. But all of you all can answer it. And Real Bear, one of the things that you talked about during our time together was the missing and murdered women, Indigenous women. We're learning even more as far as treaty rights. We know that the treaty rights that you all have somehow are conflicting with the rights of authority as well. And so the investigations that would typically take place aren't normally taking place. And so the crimes against Indigenous bodies aren't necessarily being investigated as they would typically. Can you all speak more to that and make us aware of that? And how can we help to advocate in that stead as well?
Jim Baird, do you want to take that, or would you like me to say something?
Well, what I can say is, so our native nations are sovereign nations. However, that sovereignty is very limited. So we have the sovereign right to hold elections and elect our own governing bodies. We have the rights to a judicial system on our reservations, and we have, many of us have the right to have our own police force. However, those rights are severely limited and extend only to citizens or members of the tribe itself. And in the case of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and also the incredible level of sexual violence against Indigenous women, most of those crimes are committed by non-members, so outside people, outside men, white men, if you will. And our tribal policing system and our tribal judicial system does not extend to enforcement against non-members. So what that means is a white man, and this is what happens when these large public utilities projects come in proximity to Indian land in Indigenous communities, you get this giant influx of workers that establish camps, and these are just referred to as man camps because the overwhelming amount of the workers are men, they're white men, and they reside in these temporary camps along in proximity to the work sites. And we know through a very sad history of these large public utilities projects like pipelines, we know that when those man camps are established, the sexual violence against Indigenous women will rise. We know that the disappearance rate of Indigenous women will rise, and we know that the murder rate of Indigenous women will rise. And there's this very tenuous relationship about who has jurisdiction to investigate these crimes if they take place on the reservation, and who has the legal authority to investigate and to enforce the laws if the crimes are committed on Indigenous land against Indigenous people.
I appreciate that. My reason for asking that is to make that connection of this is not just a climate issue. It's not just an environmental issue, but it's also a racial issue as well. The suffering of Indigenous people is not being seen and not being discussed. And I really believe that we as people of faith can uplift the plight of these people or of our Indigenous siblings. We can lift that plight, and we can actually raise those voices, and even bringing those voices in the room, reaching out to some of our Indigenous siblings and having them to speak for themselves, so that we can hear and come out of our ignorance concerning the conditions that our folk are subject to. And here's the biggest kicker. This pipeline isn't necessary. That's the biggest kicker. That's what really is tripping me out. Out of everything that I saw in Minnesota, I saw that this was not a necessary evil. It is just an evil.
I can say a couple.
Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, I can just say a couple of things about that. You know, what Reverend Malcom has said is totally true. The Department of Commerce in Minnesota, the very, you know, relatively conservative body, governor appointed Department of Commerce, did a study, and they found that there was no need for the oil in the state of Minnesota, that most of the oil is running directly through our state and to international markets in Sarnia. I want to just lift up the Line 5 fight in Michigan. If you know about the Straits of Mackinac, it's between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. It's an absolutely stunning place surrounded by native land. And they have run Line 5, which is the connecting pipeline underneath the Straits of Mackinac. And right now, Governor Gretchen Whitmer has actually told Enbridge to cease the use of this because of its corrosion and the danger to the Great Lakes. So all of these fights are connected, as are the sort of spider of pipelines moving across the landscape. And so, you know, whether you're in Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, all of these pipelines are sort of one in the same network. I also just wanted to say I am putting in the chat a couple of things. There's a press conference at 1 p.m. with those sisters from the Rise Coalition who are occupying that space. They're going to talk a little bit about that eviction and about the fact that the State of Appeals Court we ruled against us this morning 2-1. And it's the same argument. You know, we don't want to hurt Indigenous people, but we think it might hurt Indigenous people if Enbridge's old pipeline continues to leak, which is the worst argument in the world. If they have a bad pipeline, they should fix it. They shouldn't be building a brand new pipeline. I'm also putting the email of our organizer at MNIPL, Julia Fritz-Endres. We have a sort of a toolkit of action, if you wanted to have a presentation in your community, Julia can set you up with that. We've got all kinds of good tools to help make that happen.
Julia, thank you so much for sharing all of those resources, and a big thanks to all of our panelists today. This has been a terrific time for us to learn and also to become inspired to action. And action is exactly what we do next. As is our tradition, we don't like to just think and talk about these issues. We like to take action. And so immediately following this webinar, everyone is welcome to continue to hang out as the Reverend Roberta Rominger leads us in taking actions. She will have a PDF of actions prepared if you want to take that PDF back to your green teams. Many of the actions listed today are part of that. And so when we finish today, hang around and make your faith not just about words, but also about deeds. Together, we'll go beyond just talking about these things. And so thanks to everyone. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to those attending. Reverend Michael Malcom, do you have any final words as we wrap this up today?
If you can, stick around. Let's see how we can get involved. If we truly say that we're standing in solidarity, that means that it's not going to be comfortable, and we can't necessarily expect for it to be something that's comfortable for us, but it's something that's necessary for us to get involved in. Please stick around and help us to lift our voices. Thank you to the guests. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Reverend Baird. Thank you, Julia. And thank you all.
All right. Take care, everyone.